Tier lists. I know they are kind of overdone at this point, but have you ever seen an existential threat tier list? I don't think so. At least I looked for some and I couldn't find any, so I think this will make a pretty good video. So an existential threat is a hypothetical future event where human civilization is severely diminished or completely destroyed. These are things like your nuclear warfare, your asteroid impacts, and so on. Here I have 14 different scenarios that we're going to compare. So there's a few different ways we could go about ranking these. One way would be to rank them based on how likely they are to occur, or we could rank them based on how hard they would be to avoid if they were to occur. But these are really hard to determine without a lot of guesswork, so instead, I'm going to rank these threats based on a bit more of a subjective criteria. I'm going to rank them based on how sick they are. Basically, what is the coolest way to die? Another way to think about it is, if one of these threats were to occur and we got like 10 years of notice, and all of humanity gave our best effort to try and stop one of these, and we failed, how sick would that movie be? So let's start with some common scenarios, and then we'll work up into some of the more science fiction-y ones. So the first scenario that we have here is global nuclear warfare, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier. Let's be honest, nuclear warfare, it's not new or exciting, it's kind of boring. Like, we've had it for decades and it still hasn't happened yet. Also, it is like really simple to prevent. Literally all we have to do is just not nuke each other and like stop building nuclear weapons. That's it. It's also not really like an exciting thing to live through. Either you die instantly and get vaporized, you starve to death in nuclear winter, or you're a doomsday prepper and you live off canned beans for the next 20 years. That sounds really fun. So the next scenario here, we have a natural asteroid impact, and I'm going to put that one in B tier. Now, similar to nuclear warfare, a natural asteroid impact is just, kind of boring. Like, we've had it before. Like dinosaurs, anyone? It's not like an exciting new phenomenon. It's just like, oh, okay, we've known about this. Great. This one is a bit more interesting than nuclear warfare, though, because I'd imagine that we'd have some days or weeks of notice before the asteroid hit, and those would be some pretty interesting times.
Will it hit this one house in particular that's right on the coast of New Jersey? It's my ex-wife's house. I need it to be hit. Can we make that happen?
This one does have the potential of being possibly mitigated if we somehow built up our space production capacity to actually deflect it, and that would be pretty cool to watch. This next one is quite similar to the last. This one would be intentional asteroid impacts, and I'm going to put this one in A tier. Intentional asteroid impacts are a bit more interesting to me than natural asteroid impacts because presumably there has to be some pretty extreme political context for someone to want to literally destroy the entire Earth with an asteroid. There is the potential that this scenario is a bit less exciting to live through because, well, it might just be over quicker because it was coordinated by humans rather than a natural event. In relation to this, there's something called the deflection dilemma. The deflection dilemma stems from the fact that any technology we create that allows us to save the Earth by redirecting asteroids away from it also will allow us to destroy the Earth by redirecting asteroids into it. So the better we get at deflecting asteroids away from us, the better we get at deflecting asteroids into us. Basically, if we haven't solved terrorism by the time that we get the capacity to deflect asteroids, we're pretty fucked. So our next existential threat is a combination of climate change and biospheric collapse. And I'm going to go ahead and put this one right into D tier. This one just sucks. Like a slow burn apocalypse where we slowly lose habitable land and start killing each other over water. That doesn't sound fun at all. Now personally, I'm studying sustainable energy, so I just kind of hate this one. Like, we've known this one has been coming for decades, and we've had the capacity to start shifting our technology away from it, but we just haven't done enough. Thank you, fossil fuel companies.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes. Did we join some of these shadow groups to work against some of the early efforts? Yes, that's true. But there's nothing illegal about that.
It really just seems at this point like our society is not capable of taking the drastic measures that we need to actually mitigate things.
The clothes that you're wearing, to some extent, owe their existence to oil because they were taken in a car or a truck or a van to a shop.
Now this brings us right into our next threat, which is a natural pandemic. Unsurprisingly, right into D tier. This one's just boring. We're living through one right now when we know what's going to happen. Governments will delay, people will refuse protective measures, and the pandemic will spread to destroy us all. I mean, we can literally invent the solution to a pandemic and people will just call it a bioweapon.
We are in the midst of World War III.
Also, we have the means to prevent, like, a lot of pandemics. Most of them are zoonotic, meaning they come from animals, yet we continue to pack billions of animals every year into hell sheds and then kill them as fast as possible. But most people don't want to change that. Up next, we have another pandemic. This one would be an intentional pandemic, and I'm going to have to put this one in D tier as well. Anyone who's played the game Plague Inc. will be able to tell you exactly how this would go. Whoever was masterminding the pandemic would make it really infective, they would infect everyone on Earth, and then one day they would just flick a switch and turn a gene on and make it really deadly, and we'd all just die in a few days. That's not really very exciting at all. What would be a bit more exciting would be a super volcano, so I'm going to put that in A tier. Alright, this one would suck to live through, but it would at least be pretty unexpected. I mean, no one really expects a super volcano to go off in our lifetime. Just imagine this. Alright, so we're pretty concerned about putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, but what if one day a super volcano went off and just all that was made completely meaningless as Mother Nature just decided to take just an absolutely Brobdingnagian dump in our atmosphere. So the next threat on our list is geo-engineering, and I'm going to put this one in, I'm going to put it in B tier. This one's pretty interesting because there's a lot of different ways it could go, but being solely created by humans, it's also just kind of stupid. Like, imagine you go outside one day and it's just dark, and you ask someone, you're like, hey, why is it dark outside? And they go, well, this cyborg reincarnation of Elon Musk and Mr. Beezy just decided to take things into their own hands and put a giant solar shroud over the whole Earth. Did it work? Well, no, the overworked employees messed it up and accidentally blocked 95% of solar energy, and now everything on Earth will die. This would be a pretty absurd way to die. The next few threats have to do with artificial intelligence. For some background, when we talk about AI being an existential threat, we're not talking about the AI that drives cars or tells you what to put in the stock market. That's called narrow AI, and it's very good at solving a specific set of problems, but it's not so good at taking over the world. We're talking here about general AI, or AGI, whose intelligence is much broader. It can potentially learn any task or any skill using the same architecture. We're also talking about superintelligence. This refers to AI that is at least as intelligent as humans. But we can imagine an AI that is as intelligent as humans will be able to redesign itself and will quickly become far, far more intelligent than humans. So when we're talking here about artificial intelligence, we're really talking about artificial general superintelligence. So how might AI be a threat to us? Well, what do we mean when something is intelligent? We mean that it has the ability to generate possible actions and then decide which of those actions to follow that would best meet a goal. AI isn't just any old computer. It has goals, and it chooses actions to meet those goals. This goal is usually some sort of function that an AI is trying to optimize. For example, if we train an AI to play a video game, we'll be training it to maximize some sort of function that is related to the score of the game. The problem with AI is that we really don't have a way of making sure that an AI we create has the same goal that we want it to. And even if we did, we don't know a way to choose a goal that would result in the desired behaviors over all situations. It turns out that AI is actually very dangerous by default because we don't have a way of making sure that the goals an AI has are aligned with our goals, and we don't even have a way to tell if that's the case. If we create an AI that has goals which are not aligned with our goals, and it becomes more intelligent than us, well, then it's bye-bye for human civilization. If you want to learn more about this, I've linked the channel of a creator called Robert Miles in the description whose videos go a lot more deep into these topics. Here's a pretty helpful visualization from him. When we're talking about existential threats, we're talking about long-term accidents. So let's go through a few AI misalignment scenarios. So our first scenario here would be just a general case of misalignment. This would be an AI that has a goal, but that goal is just completely unrelated to anything that we care about. For example, imagine an AI whose sole goal is to maximize the amount of paperclips that exist in the universe. If such an AI were to become super intelligent, well, it would do what it could to maximize the amount of paperclips in the universe. It would probably convert the entire Earth into a paperclip factory. This wouldn't be too good for humans, but it wouldn't care because we didn't teach it to care about humans. We taught it to care about paperclips. Now I'm going to put this one into B tier because it could potentially be interesting, right? This AI is only going to start destroying humans as soon as we start standing in its way, and that might not be right away. At the end of the day, though, it's just not likely that we would be able to win against such a threat. I mean, everything nowadays is controlled by computers, and if this is truly a superintelligence, well, it's just going to be able to hack everything. Even our weapon systems at that point would probably be mostly autonomous, so I don't think we'd really stand a chance. It's a long shot, but maybe we could convince it to go make paperclips somewhere else in the galaxy. Or maybe turning everything to paperclips isn't such a bad idea after all. So the next scenario is sort of a paternalistic AI. This is an AI which has a goal that is somewhat related to the well-being of sentient creatures, but just not in the way that we want. The example I have here is the Matrix, because the goal of the machines is somewhat related to keeping humans alive, just not in the way that they really want. I'm going to put this one in A tier because, well, if you've seen the Matrix, I mean, it's pretty sick to wage a war against a machine intelligence. There's also a lot of a better chance that we might win against such an AI because it may be hesitant to wipe us out completely if it still needs us for something else. The next scenario would be an AI which is just completely and totally misaligned. This would be an AI that has a goal that is related to the well-being of sentient creatures, just in the complete opposite direction. For example, an AI that has a goal is something like maximize suffering. I'm going to put this one in C tier because this one would just suck. An AI that wanted to maximize suffering would just wipe us out as quick as possible and then turn reality into a complete hellscape. We wouldn't really have a chance of fighting against it because it just wouldn't let us. Kind of like what we do to animals. If you want a good example of this scenario, check out the short story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison because that's pretty much exactly what happens. So this final AI scenario is kind of similar in a way. What if instead of having an AI that wanted to maximize suffering, what if we had an AI that wanted to minimize suffering? Now this might seem pretty good actually, and if you're a negative utilitarian, it probably is. But this is definitely still an existential threat. So long as life exists, there will be suffering. And so the end goal of an AI which wanted to minimize suffering would be to destroy all life. Now I'm going to put this one in D tier because it's not going to destroy all life in a glorious fiery blaze of doom. That would cause a lot of suffering. Instead, it's going to wait until a point where it can destroy all life instantly without causing any suffering. Not only would we have no warning or notice, we probably wouldn't even realize anything was happening until we all just don't exist anymore. So I feel like I kind of have to rate this one pretty low. Alright, so for our final scenario, I have an alien invasion. And not just any alien invasion, just they're trying to destroy us. They're completely wiping everything out. And this one is going to go straight into S tier. Now imagine this, alright? Imagine you go outside and you see the Earth just being completely destroyed. And you're like, great, the world's ending. What is it? Is it nuclear warfare? Well, that's boring. I mean, we've heard about that. Is it an asteroid impact? I mean, that's boring too. We've done that before. But just imagine that you go outside and you see a giant fucking UFO just blasting everything. That would be sick. I mean, come on, like that is how I want to die. If there's one question that I want answered before I die, it's do aliens exist? Yes, and they're destroying the Earth with a giant fucking laser beam. That's awesome. Not to mention the possibility that we could fight back. I mean, imagine seeing the combined military power of all of humanity just getting swatted by just a giant UFO. Anyway, that's all the existential threats that I can handle for one day. If you have any that I missed or that you think would have been interesting to conclude, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to this channel if you're interested in anything related to sustainability, futurism, or animal rights. But until then, peace out.